Professor James A. Russell is an associate professor in the Department of National Security at the Naval Postgraduate School. He's joining us live from Monterey in the United States. Professor James, good to see you. Good evening to you and welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you.
Let's start with the United Nations vote. Hours ago, the United Nations General Assembly overwhelmingly adopted what they're calling a non-binding resolution where 120 voted for, 14 against, and 45 abstentions. What does this vote mean for Israel and Gaza, bearing in mind countries that abstained, including Canada and Iran?
I think it illustrates very clearly that the conflict has gone global, which is to say that it is drawing global reactions from around the world. Those global reactions are creating pressures in and of themselves that are, I think, intended to shape decision-making on the ground, most particularly by the Israelis, but also by the United States. The Washington Post, for example, recently reported that the United States, while voting against the resolution, is now in favor of a humanitarian pause. In other words, the overwhelming expressions of sentiment for some kind of humanitarian-based ceasefire is globally based. And it seems to me this is founded on with the justified concern over the horrific deaths of innocent civilians that are piling up on the Palestinian side. The Palestinians now estimate there are over 7,000. President Biden questioned these numbers the other day, and the Palestinians promptly produced the names of the people that are dead.
Right.
I mean, this is a horrible, horrific kind of a situation, and I think it clearly demonstrates the need for some kind of pause. And I also might add,
Professor, let's talk about that pause because you've mentioned it there. There are calls for a ceasefire, which are growing from around the world. The United Nations is insisting that ground invasion is going to be a huge humanitarian catastrophe. Israel is adamant that the operation will proceed. Who is the likely mediator in this war? Who will Israel or even Hamas listen to, in your own opinion?
Yeah, so this is, of course, the problem. I mean, the United States wants to position itself, and I think has positioned itself, of course, as a voice of caution in the ears of the Israelis. And we've sent military advisors over to Israel to sort of try to, I hesitate to use these words, but to talk sense into them. This idea somehow that Israel can launch a military operation like that, which is contemplated in Gaza with hundreds of thousands of civilians in the vicinity, with these military objectives of the Hamas underground network, it's going to be a bloodbath, right? This idea somehow that you can have surgical strikes and special forces going in and rooting out these tunnel networks, it's just not feasible. So the United States, I think, is attempting to be the voice of caution. I don't think it's going to succeed. I think if one looks back at the Israeli response to these kinds of situations, their attitude is to escalate and to try to achieve their military objectives, and I think this is what they're going to do. So on the other side, who's Hamas exactly going to listen to? This is another unknown, right? I don't have who can act as a mediator. The Egyptians, right? They would be a logical candidate. The Saudis, some collection of regional states to try to get them to de-escalate. That would be the logical, kind of grouping of states that you would hope that would step in a situation like this.
Okay. Professor, finally, there's a lot of uncertainty over what the current Israeli plan is and whether the expansion of ground operations indicates a full ground invasion, like you mentioned there. The airstrikes are intensifying in Gaza. Is this ground invasion, in your opinion, highly likely?
I think it's a virtual certainty. I think that the public opinion, for example, the public pressure for action by the IDF and on the government is overwhelming. I expect it's going to proceed, and it's not going to go well. The Israelis, again, looking at the past as an indication of what might happen in the future. The Israelis are not shy about escalating. The Israelis are not shy about using all means at their disposal to engage in what they see as a defensive operation. And it's going to be horrific. I don't see any way of turning them around. I don't think the United States can do it. I think we're doing our best. I'm of course not privy to any of these conversations, but I see this going ahead, and things are going to get worse before they get better.
All right, I've been talking to an associate professor in the Department of National Security at the Naval Postgraduate School, Professor James A. Russell. Thank you very much for all your inputs and for talking to WION World is One today.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.